Welcome to Channel AMEC, your insight to the Australian visa system. Good day everyone, my name is Carl Young, your online YouTube visa consultant. Now, are you interested about migrate or perhaps study abroad in Australia? Why don't you consider to subscribe to my channel and turn on a little bell on the side? So once we have all the updates and news, you'll be the first one of getting all the insights. Okay, now today's video, we would like to talk about what we have received on the news. Probably a lot of you guys have already read them. In regards to the state government of New South Wales wanting to actually promote the pilot program to bring international students back to Australia. Now, before we go into the depths of the news, it seems interesting because last year I thought the pilot program was done by the state of South Australia, which Adelaide had actually bring numbers of students back into Adelaide, and so as Northern Territory. Now it's New South Wales. So whether or not this pilot program will actually prolong and spread out to Victoria, Queensland, perhaps Western Australia, and the whole nation of Australia, we don't know. It looks like all the government around the world, and especially all the government in Australia, is looking to actually get into a program which they could actually get the international education to actually survive throughout this pandemic. Anyway, let's have a look and jump into the actual news and have a look what it says. Right, okay, so as you can see, this news is actually written 3 days ago, and I'm not too sure why they updated 2 days ago. Anyhow, I've done a little bit of research, and that's why it took me a little bit of time. And there's still ambiguity, and it's not really clear whether this pilot program will further expand. And all I need to tell you is that if you are an international student and you wanting to come back to Australia to study, you need to apply travel exemption through your institution, through your universities, and that's where these international students can actually travel back to Australia, because it's under the pilot quarantine plan, which, well, I thought last year they got it done, but obviously throughout the past 12 months you've seen a lot of dramas going on with the quarantine hotels and things like that, and everybody's seeing the differences of variants of COVID viruses. Anyhow, what does this story says? Let me read it out and explain in detail. So international students will be welcome back to New South Wales from as early as July, which was a couple weeks away, under the pilot program announced by the New South Wales government. Obviously, all the education institutions welcome such decisions, but obviously in regards to this, it requires to be negotiated with the federal government to allow this to be happening. Obviously, there's going to be an open border, different type of quarantine stuff, and things like that. So New South Wales Treasury Dominic Perrott on Thursday announced the plan, which will initially see only 250 students per fortnight. And that's not too bad, because they want the quarantine hotel to actually quarantine anyone for at least 14 days. That's what fortnight was put there, especially approved student accommodations. Gotta be very careful, because if one person got infected, then the whole quarantine accommodation will be doomed. So anyhow, this needs to be treated very, very carefully. So the Treasurer said that the figure will increase to 500 per fortnight by the end of the year, will not interfere the current hotel quarantine arrangements. That means they are turning some or partial, perhaps, or the coming up student accommodation into a quarantine student accommodations. Importantly, not one returning Australia will be getting seat on the plane as a result of this plan, he says. So what does that mean? That means that plane is only for international students? Question mark. I think that's what they're trying to say. We will run alongside 3,000 returning Australian that come into a hotel quarantine system every week. Before pandemic, about 250,000 internationals were studying in New South Wales. Obviously, most of them are gone, and the state's second largest export again, and it's a third or fourth largest export for the nation as well. The treasurer said that they were 50,000 overseas students who were currently trying to get into New South Wales. I think it's more than that. He said it will provide a vital job certainty for 100,000 workers in the sector. This is a big win for New South Wales economy. We believe that cost of the economy since pandemic began, particularly related to international students, is around 5 billion. Wow, look at that, 5 billion. That's huge. And we didn't do anything. The cost will grow by the end to become 11 billion. So they eagerly need to save the industry. This is incredibly important because the evidence, in particular around the world, places like Canada, US, and UK are actively tackling at this industry that New South Wales relies on. Not just New South Wales, it's the whole nation. There's so many international education institutions suffering at the moment, and this statement is particularly correct because USA, Canada, and UK, they are still accepting international students going into the country and study. They don't mind at all, but Australia has taken a different approach. And so is New Zealand, I believe. Now, the New South Wales government has now not revealed the exact location where the quarantine facility is, but it's under negotiation. He said that the pilot program approved by New South Wales Health and New South Wales Police is a proposal of federal government that had received strong support back. And again, that's what I'm saying. Not just the state. I think all the state government wants to have the international student back, but it's the federal government who is blocking the initiation. But looks like if this is going to go through, it should spread to all different states and territories. But again, since 2020, things are moving particularly fast, and nothing had actually gone under the plan. Everything changes every day, every second, every minute. Now, the next news is medical postgrad international student, the first to return New South Wales, obviously, because they are in the critical sector. They're in the primary critical skill occupation list. And this was 2 days ago, so it's about the same timing where they announced these international students who study medicine, health-related degrees. Those close to finishing their studies will given priority to return to New South Wales. Long Way Rescue Plan University will foot the bill. International students return this week within weeks. So again, 250 students, not thousand. I'm sorry, to start with. And then it has to go into quarantine student accommodation. So this news act particularly point out not every student is allowed in. They are looking and piloting most of the medical and nurses occupation students to be in, and especially those one who are about to graduate. So they want to absorb them as first of all as their skill shortage in Australia. So each university will allocate a number of seats of private flight based on the proportion of international students who had in 2019. So they are targeting people who are about to graduate within a year or a semester. So the treasurer said that the pilot program 14 billion international student education sector on Thursday. Final Commonwealth approval expected in days. The stage return international student to New South Wales come amid debate over when border could open. So that means would they allow other travelers to come in? So as many as 30,000 Australians still stranded overseas. Correct. And now this is a repeat statement. The Federal Education Minister Alan Tudge, who was the previous Minister of Immigration, said that New South Wales plan appeared to meet the government's criteria. So there's a particular criteria that the state government has to apply for. I think this will actually match as a standards to move, for every other state government out there. So that's Queensland, Victoria, and Western Australia, and perhaps Tasmania as well. We're keen to see international student return, obviously, and the student will range from country predominantly China, but also other, including Singapore and South Korea, will quarantine purpose-built student accommodations to arrive in Sydney. The first site has been chosen in negotiation. The pilot program is expected within 6 weeks. Will scale up to 500 students per fortnight. So that's all the same statements as what we have seen in the previous news. Now, it's interesting where in the timing that they have set for this one, because as I expected from the past, every time there is a major economic issues in Australia, migration is one way to solve the problem. Now, to improve migration, obviously international education sector is very, very vital, because without these skilled migrants, you don't want to accept migrants who doesn't have the skill. They want them to contribute to the society. So the skilled migrant is very vital, and it always comes 70% comes from the graduates, international student, international education sectors. Now, the only concern that I had is that whether this will actually match the need and requirement, and the amount of international student will suffice. The need there is still question mark, because today there's still one local COVID cases in Victoria. That means, and also I'm not too sure whether they have caught every other ones in New South Wales and Queensland, but this is concerning because if this spreads out, and we've learned that the new variant of the COVID is actually very nasty, and it spreads very, very quick and in time. For example, you can see what's happening in Malaysia and recently in Taiwan as well. It's a concerning factor as well, whether that this will affect the future of international students returning back to Australia. That is still a question mark. And also, if you're looking at what's happening in USA, where they have massive number of vaccinations, they allowing all tourists coming from different places to get vaccinated, and it also promotes the tourism and also international education in USA. But in further ahead, if we're looking through to UK, England, the spike of infected rate has got into a particular high recently. So whether or not that is still a consideration for Australia to actually move into a final opening, or perhaps stay in a safety net sort of, fortress Australia, that's what they call. What is your thought? Do you think they should open, or perhaps going into stage by stage like what we have seen? Leave a comment right down below, and I see you next video. Goodbye.